Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we are going to talk about kit bashing, and it's going to be combined with showing some pictures of my Space Marine army, which I think is a fairly decent example of some, I'd say probably more basic kit bashing. You'll note as the images go through and rotate around that it's kind of Terminator heavy. I really like Terminators a lot, and as such there are a lot of them. And I guess this is a part of this is to do with the fact that you guys keep asking to see my army, and so I've done my best to take some decent pictures with the equipment I have available, which is my phone and a light box without any lights because the lights burnt out within like one day of buying it. Don't buy cheap lights, that's a terrible idea. They don't work very well, they just collapse on you. Pro tip of the day there. Just a quick note before we get into it. I've said that I have a painted Space Marine army. I've never said that I have a well-painted Space Marine army. Honestly, they're not as good as I could do now, but they're passable. So, if you're sitting there thinking, this is not pro-painted material, no, definitely not. Absolutely not. I'm not capable of pro-painted material, but they're tabletop, and that'll do for now. Anyway, on with the video. So I suppose this is a combination of showing you what I've done with my army and sort of briefly saying what I use to kit bash all of this stuff, and I guess a bit of encouragement as well. It can be kind of intimidating when you look at the range of options that you get from Games Workshop. It can be kind of intimidating if you think to yourself, I'd quite like to do an army themed around whatever you want it to be themed around. There are enough parts and third-party sellers and stuff that you are pretty much able to make whatever you like. But sometimes it's kind of easy to look at everything that's available and think, maybe I should just stick with what's in the box. Maybe I should just stick with doing that. Maybe I shouldn't, really push it. Maybe I should stick with it being mostly standard. And that's fine. But really, one of the best things about the Games Workshop stuff, and especially Space Marines are ridiculously good for this, is that you can pretty much combine any kit that you like with a kit of similar size. So for instance, the Terminators that you can see, they are made from 3 different kits. They are made from a standard Space Marine Terminator box, a Dark Angels Deathwing box, and Space Wolves Terminator box. Now, of course, the combination of Deathwing and Space Wolves Terminators is heresy, as I'm sure you're all aware, but I kind of like the different stylings of both. I wanted a mix of, I guess, a proper mishmash of iconology. So, my chapter, which technically is an approved Games Workshop chapter, it's the Scar Lords. I think they appeared once in, I think it's either the Tau Codex. I think it is the Tau Codex. It might not be in this edition of the Tau Codex, but it was in one of the previous ones, talking about the Damocles Gulf conflict, talks of the Scar Lords, and that seems to be their only reference in the lore. Something that I quite like doing is taking those chapters that have little to no backstory and just doing something with it, either expanding on that or taking it in a direction that seems to suit the name. So for my Space Marine chapter, for my massive number, for my 21 Terminators, the Scar Lords were involved in the Damocles Gulf conflict, and I believe the line in there is that a Tau something or other fought one of their warrior kings and used some sort of stasis device to lock both of them, in stasis. I looked at that, and I looked at the name Scar Lords, and I thought, I kind of feel like Scar Lords implies a tribalistic, kind of almost barbaric, kind of Space Wolf vibe. What would happen if the thing that was keeping them in check in terms of being loyal servants was that warrior king, was that, I assume, chapter master, and that losing that chapter master to the Tau had an effect on the chapter as a whole, whereby instead of kind of curbing their kind of tribal nature, they actually ended up embracing it somewhat. And so the idea of a chapter that really is incredibly superstitious, there's angel iconography, there's stuff, what did I say before? Iconography is what I meant. There's like there's kind of tribal furs and symbols of angels and swords and judgment and stuff like that. It's like a mix of everything, because to them there's a hint of truth to all of it. There's also a significant amount of scavenging, and they wear scars that they've gained in battle with pride. So one of the things that I thought would be kind of cool is the armour that they wear. Each of it is a little bit different. There's no uniform pattern to it. Some of it is bronze on one leg, some of it is bronze all the way down the middle, some of it is mostly grey with just one gauntlet that's bronze. It's like it's a very individual kind of scheme that each of them goes for, but the scars that they have from battle are represented on their armour through the use of like over-oxidation or rusting, or even like ritual blooding on the armour. So they will actively make their gear look worn and more battered depending on the severity of the scar that they have on their real body. It just all kind of feeds into this superstitious try and look as intimidating as possible, whilst simultaneously kind of eyeing things up for repurposing after battle. Very sort of scavenger-like, on the verge of heresy, let's face it. I mean, they're still technically loyal, but they are right on the verge of just fully descending into some sort of chaos-fueled rampage across whichever world happens to be closest. But I quite like that kind of flirting with danger element as well. So to represent all of that, I took all these different kits and I put them all together. There's, standard Imperial symbols, there's stuff from Dark Angels, there's stuff from Space Wolves, there's even hints of Chaos around the place, which again was very intentional. I had bits of Chaos Terminators lying around from, I don't know when, actually, and incorporated those because it's still kind of an icon. It's still something that holds a bit of power, a bit of sway. And when you sort of say, oh, well, I took 3 different kits and put them together, on the surface it might seem a little bit intimidating. It might seem like, well, that's a lot to deal with. But the wonderful thing about the Space Marine range especially is that pretty much everything fits everything else. Yes, you might have to fiddle around with some of the poses. Yes, you might have to mess about with where some of the arms attach, especially when you're combining things like Space Wolf and Dark Angel stuff. The kits they're still compatible, but they require a little bit more messing with because they've got that extra decoration. They've got those extra little bits lying around on them, like the robes and things can get in the way of certain legs from the Space Wolf kit. I mean, even the standard Space Marine kit can be a bit fiddly to combine with some of them, but it's entirely possible, and it's not as tricky as you think. It's kind of, I wouldn't say that my army is massively kind of converted. To me, there's a difference between a conversion and a kitbash. They're used kind of interchangeably, but to me, a conversion is changing something from its original purpose into something else. So, what would be a good example? Oh no, I do have a good example actually. No, I do have one. Hang on. Okay, so I think a good example of a conversion as opposed to a kitbash would be that. Really should have taken a picture of this. I might do actually. So that is a Centurion, Space Marine Centurion, which has been converted to be an obliterator for a Nurgle army that actually never really got off the ground, sadly. I started getting all these Mark III Marine bits with the intention of green stuffing the hell out of them and making them all Nurglified, and then Games Workshop came out with the actual Death Guard stuff, and I'll be honest, it had a more kind of visual impact than I felt I could match, so that project kind of fell by the wayside. But one thing that I did do is create an obliterator out of a Centurion. So, I mean, it's Centurion parts, it's got a Centurion las cannon, but that's been green stuff to the shoulder. One of the arms has been replaced with a big bundle of weapons. There's, I believe that's part of the Demon Prince kit, the thing on the front, like the tabard thing, and there's an Imperial Knight helmet as a shoulder pad. That is to me is a conversion. The stuff that you're seeing in the background, the images of my Space Marine army, those are kit bashes. It's just taking two kits and slapping them together. That was significantly more work, and it's, it represents a model that this isn't a model of. This isn't actually an obliterator. It's a conversion into an obliterator from a Centurion. Conversions, I think, are a slightly different beast, but again, it's not really something to be intimidated by. It's not something to be worried about, because one of the best things about this hobby is the amount of creativity that you can use to create something that you like the look of. If I were to make a Demon Prince again, for instance, I would not use the Demon Prince model. Or at least I might use part of it, but I would absolutely use other bits, and I would green stuff the shit out of it so that it was closer to what I would want to see from a Demon Prince. There's so much in the way of resources as well. Like, if you're really serious about properly personalising an army, if you're really serious about making it look your own, you can find so many different tutorials and so many different parts and pieces from other websites. Things like Spellcrow and Anvil Industries and Bits of War have got some really great pieces as well. You can properly make a unique army, which is one of the other things that I find impressive about 40k. Again, especially when it comes to things like Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines, just because they are the most popular, and so they get the most attention. They get the most third-party parts, they get the most attention from Games Workshop. That's just the truth of it. But despite the sheer number of Space Marine armies out there, you can absolutely make your own. You can make something that is unmistakably yours. Now, I'm not saying that my Space Marine army is completely unique. I'm sure there are plenty of other people who've done something similar. But it doesn't look exactly like a standard Space Marine army. It doesn't look exactly like a standard Chaos Space Marine army. The way that it's painted, the way that the colour scheme is different on every single model, just about anyway, close enough. That's something that is not the same as just a standard Space Marine army. There's so much you can do with just adding bits here and there. For instance, one of my favourite examples, and something that I've wanted to do for years but never really been able to find the right time to do it, would be to create a completely loyal army, which has a heavy tie to the religious imagery of the Imperium. Not just that, but the use of things like purity seals and oath papers for prayer and so on. I mean, essentially word bearers, but actually loyal. You could achieve that relatively easily now. There's plenty of places that do, a big batch of purity seals on one sprue. And just by adding stuff like that to a model, you can very quickly go from having something where you look at it and go, that could be anyone's army, to, that is my army, that is unmistakably my army. I think just to finish this, there's also a aspect of simplicity as well. You don't always have to take 3 kits and smash them together. You don't have to take, a bunch of parts from like Puppets War or something and slap them all over your models in an attempt to make them different. Sometimes a single detail can be all that you really need, whether it be a uniform piece that every model has, like a particular shoulder pad on one side or a particular helmet, or in the case of my Imperial Knight, there are plenty of Imperial Knights that are painted grey and black. I know this. There are plenty of Imperial Knights that have got rust on them. I know this. But the thing that makes this one mine, and the thing that I like about it that seems to be relatively unique, maybe not completely, but relatively unique, is having the Demon Prince wing chained to the shoulder. It's only a small thing. It's not a huge addition. It's not like I've changed anything else. It's got a few purity seals here and there on the banner, but in terms of a distinguishing feature, something to make it stand out from other knights that might be painted similarly, or other knights that have the same loadout, it has that change to its silhouette, which kind of makes me, when I see it, immediately know, yeah, that's mine. that's one of the things that's great about kitbashing. That's one of the things I love about kitbashing, and that's why I really hope that it's something that never dies out of the hobby, because with just a couple of changes, with just messing around with it a little bit, you can make something that is completely your own, and all it really does is just add an extra element of pride to having a finished army. Yeah, if you can kitbash, you should. If you're thinking about kitbashing but you're worried about doing it because you're not sure what people's reaction will be, most people will be fine with it. If you are intimidated by the idea of doing a kitbash, then don't be. I mean, for a start, if you mark it up first with a bit of blue tack, or maybe just the tiniest dab of super glue, something that's easily snappable, you can pretty much make whatever you like with a little bit of practice, and the more you do it, the better you'll get, and the more unique and the more different your army will become, which, let's face it, is never a bad thing. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope you enjoyed the images of the army. I apologise they were not great quality, but better than now, right? Yeah, thank you very much for watching. There's the usual array of things to click. There's like a couple of videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo.